Okay.
I just kind of don't. Just picked him up.
Okay, we're gonna call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Centertown District Steering Committee meeting, January 29th. We're doing a quick roll call. Carolyn Farros, Committee Chair. Jason Gumbert, Vice Chair, is here. Don Starks is not here today. Nicole is going to be late. Graham.
Yep.
And then we have ex officio town council member Ralph Page and ex officio planning board member Robert Terrell. Okay, so we're gonna take up, can I get a motion to take up old business PVCP review process district boundary map with parcel
So
impact?
moved.
All
Second.
right, thank you. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves again?
Thank you. My name is Kyle Cornell, Senior Planner with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Tonight I'm joined by colleagues Hank Bonilla, Deputy Director of our Land Use and Environment Section, and Aiden Hemian McMahon, Senior Planner with Land Use and Environment. We're ready to just review of Centertown District Dining Project to date. And quick little profile of the Centertown District as it was determined at the December steering committee meeting. So where we are in the process, we are ready to begin drafting the bylaw language for the Centertown District. Starting that effort in earnest tonight with steering committee's deliberation. The project for PVPC's role and work will include when we have a complete draft bylaw that the steering committee is ready to forward through the bylaw adoption process. So still have several rounds. We'll need to go to the planning board for their approval, where it goes to the council for their final review and final vote. So the Centertown District, as amended with steering committee input in December, is a 96.5 acre area in the center of town. This is approximately just 1.2% of the total land area of East Longmeadow. And it includes 122 existing tax parcels. Breakdown of how the district is currently zoned. So of those 122 existing tax parcels, 57 are zoned business, 7 zoned commercial, 50 are currently zoned industrial. 4 are multi-zones, meaning that they have been designated multiple zones. Only 1 parcel has been zoned residential A and 3 parcels residential C. So there's a median size, just to get a sense of how large those parcels can be. Total acreage by the zone. Most of the district is currently zoned industrial, nearly 45%. And currently only 0.7% zoned strictly for residential use. So this is primarily a business, commercial, industrial zoned area that the steering committee has identified for rezoning through this bylaw process. That concludes our old business.
Okay. Thank you very much. Excuse me. So we're going to move on to old business B. Do I have a motion to move on to town manager remarks?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good evening. I asked to interject myself into their meeting agenda tonight to sort of go over really why we're here from the manager's office's perspective, why we're undertaking this. Obviously, the grant process is what it is. This is 40R feasibility. It means a lot more to the sort of the initiatives coming out of our office. The biggest of which, Ralph's probably sick of me saying it, but I will continue to say it all budget season. The number one reason for looking into this is revenue. We are reaching a critical point in the town's budget. Sometime in the next year or two, our expense curve and revenue curve are going to intersect, which will only lead to diminishing of the services provided by the budget. We've been growing the general fund budget by about 5% for quite some time. State law only allows us to tax a community at 2.5%, which is why we had to go to vote for the high school, because that would have taken us outside of what we're allowed to tax by law. The second part of that revenue piece outside of 2.5 is called new growth. And it's just what it sounds like. Any new tax growth in that previous year, you can add to your levy. We've been stagnant, to say the least, at around $500,000 for, call it a decade. We have our, 12 lot subdivision here, one new business there, a little more personal property in the industrial zone here, there. The 5% curve is catching to our 2.5% curve, which is not hard to see. And we're sort of limited on revenue stream. And the revenue stream is almost essentially all tax base. Enter mixed use. Mixed use allows us to grow our tax base in the same place that we already have tax base. Only instead of one use on a parcel that we charge X, we leave that use and add a residential component on top of it, say collecting 3 times as much taxes as we were collecting before in the same place. The second part of this is affordable housing. And I know that term gets thrown around and misused. So I'll say it again, affordable housing is defined as 80% of the median income of the town, the area, the region, the town. The number for the 80% number for this area is $62,000 a year. Translating into rental costs for one person of $1,600 a month, which from the amount of people that I talk to, young and old, that are clamoring for more affordable housing, their first response to $1,600 a month is, well, that's not that affordable. And the third is, and you can see the numbers are still up here, we have a extremely outdated industrial zone in the center of our town, which was super appropriate when we had the rail and an industrial base in the center of town. At some point, the rail went away. We carved out the southwest corner of the town for our industrial garden park, and that industrial zone is no longer appropriate. The list of uses on an industrial parcel is not anything you want to see on Maple Street. So this is sort of why this undertaking sort of came to be. Yes, we received a grant to check the feasibility of a possible angle and a possible makeup of this district. But the fact of the matter is, this mixed use is going to generate development. and that development will build our tax base. And that is something we are going to desperately need in the next year or two or three. It's incentivizing development. So now this piece of property used to be worth this. Now it's worth more to a developer who is going to get a larger return on his or her investment. That's sort of the gist of it. The 40R piece only provides more incentives to the developer in the way of payment from the state. The state's involvement in this process, when we finish our draft bylaw, is to read our draft bylaw and say yay or nay. If they say nay, we don't talk about 40R anymore. We roll with our Centertown district however we see fit. If they say yay, we still go on with our process. If at any point the planning board or the town council amends this bylaw to the point where it's no longer eligible for 40R, we don't talk about 40R anymore. So we're still really early here. Again, we have the bucket. There's not one regulation on any one of these properties yet, not one. That's their agenda tonight. And I know you got a lot to get to, so I'll get out of the way, but I appreciate you letting me sort of tell everybody why we're here, other than the fact that it's part of the grant process. But this is a solution to a lot of three of the biggest problems that we've identified for our town, all in one process. So with that, thank you all for being here. Again, I appreciate all the interest, and I'm going to let the agenda sort of take the day.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. All right. I think we're going to move on to new business. Letter A is review and deliberation of model 40R bylaw. Section on permitted uses is number 1. Can I get a motion to move on to new business 1A?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so this is, I guess where it gets fun. Is this, do we kick it to you guys to talk or?
Yeah. So although I'm not sure if I'll take the microphone. We also have another microphone, so
They both will work.
okay, so I can,
If you turn
that way we can hear you and me.
Do a test because it can be a little bit sensitive.
I don't think it's, oh yeah, there we go. Okay. And back. Hi, everybody. So we're going to start off. I can start off by addressing this slide. So we're just going to go through 3 sort of major sections of the 40R bylaw. They're going to be permitted uses, section 4, which we have broken down into residential uses that
I want to hold it.
okay. Residential uses that this steering committee may or may not want to allow, and then mixed use and the non-residential components of mixed use. Then we're going to go into dimensional and density requirements, section 6 in the packets that you have in front of you, section 6 in the 40R model bylaw. And then we're going to go into parking requirements. And this is going to be sort of an initial discussion on all of those topics with some leading questions on our slides. Okay, so starting off with the permitted uses, the question is, first a statement, typical housing types in the Centertown district include single-family attached, duplexes and triplexes, neighborhood scale multifamily, and mixed use. If you take a look at the second page of the packets that you all, steering committee has in front of you, you'll see that in section 4.1, the bylaw requires some specificity regarding the types of residential uses that the town wants to include. So really, this is intended to just be a prompt to encourage some discussion from you all regarding that question. What is it that you'd like to see in regard to residential uses in Centertown District?
Your discussion.
I do have one real quick question. So on here, it just says single family, where it says single family, that is specifying single family attached. So that would be like a townhome style,
Right.
single family
Yeah,
attached.
single family attached would be included under the umbrella of single family.
Okay, okay. Did you have a thought?
Well, I think mixed use is definitely one of the things that we want.
Yes, yeah, so the next slide, and this doesn't have to be quite so segmented. The
Yeah.
next section here is mixed use and non-residential development. And we were thinking of breaking it up just so that you have a discussion about whether or not, for example, you want to allow residential uses that aren't part of a mixed use development. And then if so, what types you'd like to allow, and then continue on to discussing mixed use.
Okay. Thoughts?
I'll start things off, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just start broadly here. I'm looking at this from the perspective of, it's easy to start restricting. So I'm looking to hear other people's opinions on this committee of any concerns they would have about, going with sort of the broadest options here.
Sure, you want me to? I've got no problems talking.
I'll start.
I'm typically not used to a microphone, but my first thought is the Centertown district comprises currently all of our business, commercial, industrial uses. What I'm looking at here is basically a bylaw for residential uses. I don't see how our tax revenue could possibly go up with allowing a business to be taken out and a single family home to replace it. My suggestion would be no single family residential. Mixed use, absolutely. I think that's critical to this. Going forwards, that's what I thought the gist of this would be a mixed use district. But I honestly don't see any benefits whatsoever to allowing our business and commercial zone to be transferred into residential. I think that would just take away from our tax base rather than adding to it. Thank you.
I think the use of an industrial parcel, there are a number of industrial parcels and everybody in this room, I'm sure, is familiar with some of them. Many of those industrial parcels are not generating much revenue at all. And in order to put those onto a revenue producing direction, there's going to have to be some, I think, significant residential development in the center district. I would not advocate single families. I would advocate a much higher density. I think we have to be very careful with regard to how it's done, but putting a multifamily condo unit or apartment unit done properly will increase the revenue from that parcel very, very significantly.
So the reason I asked the question about single family attached versus single family detached is because I think there's a distinction. I agree that a single family detached home in the center of town does not make sense. If single family attached, where you could have a potential, rule of five or so townhouses that are considered single family, but they are attached, I could see where that would be beneficial, but if.
Mine all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I,
His fault.
yeah, blame you. Wasn't me. So I could see where a single family, attached, complex, if you will, would make sense, but, single family detached homes would not. But I think the single family attached kind of fits in with the duplex, triplex kind. So that's why I asked about that distinction. And if that's a distinction that we could make, then I fully agree. Single family homes. We have lots of single family homes, and we have lots of area outside of the center of town where single family homes could be placed. Density is what we need.
Well said.
Okay,
Carolyn, can I
Yeah.
just
absolutely.
The other thing I just wanted to point out is recently, I believe it was about 4 years ago, we had a parcel which is listed here, which is industrial, that a developer tried to get a zone change for to put in residential housing. And not only did the public come out against it, but ultimately the town council voted against having single family houses take over for an industrial, even though 2 of the 3 sides abutted residential properties. So I think the town really wants to be protective of this area, and they're cognizant about increasing the amount of traffic and all. But I do think, like you said, attached has possibly a place, definitely mixed use, absolutely. Thank you.
I think there's I'll take the microphone. So it sounds like there's a question for PVPC amongst the group here. How do you distinguish between the housing types and the density? Because I think what I'm hearing is that, so the single family attached or some sort of like cottage court could be potential things to consider that are still single family homes, but they're not going to bring in the same value as something that is multifamily. But how can you control for how many single family units can go on a parcel compared to the multi-units?
So. Wow, great. So I, other folks maybe can speak to that as well, but I can just start off by saying, as you all know, I believe, so 40R does stipulate minimum densities for residential. So it's 8 units per acre for single family, 12 units per acre for 2 and 3 family, and 20 units per acre for multifamily. And so, you know, if you decide that you want to include those uses for it to qualify for 40R consideration, it will have to follow those density minimums as well. So that's something to just keep in mind as well. I don't know if anybody else wanted to speak to that question. Yeah, I would just also say, you know, when you're thinking about like that's the guiding density requirement. We will in a little bit also start to just touch on dimensional requirements. And if you're talking about you know, lot size and different dimensional considerations, percentage of the lot that can be built out, you can start to get into some of those questions as well and really get into the details about what development will look like. And this is really meant to be sort of a, you know, a higher level question, but I get that, of course, you want to start thinking about it in those specific details too, which is what's going to come next. So does that sort of answer the question for the time being?
We shut it off for.
Just to be clear, the when we talk about setting a maximum density, it's up to that number, correct?
Minimum.
No.
That's a minimum.
Minimum.
So that's a minimum. Yeah, and sorry about this, folks. That's the minimum density to qualify for 40R. So again, it's 8 units per acre for single family, 12 for 2 and 3 family, and 20 for multifamily. And yes, that's the minimum. You can go above that, but you can't go below it.
What I'm asking is if, let's say it's set at 20. And a developer wants to do 10 on that part within that district. Does that void 40R?
So it
Wire? It's the wire, I think.
fire. We can hear you.
Yeah, I just talking.
Okay, so, just talk without this. Got it, okay. So those density requirements would be written into the bylaw, which means that to get approval under 40R, if a developer were to bring that project forward and the bylaw was in effect, it would have to meet those requirements to meet the standards of the bylaw. So it's 20 units per acre. So if it's a half acre, right, it's not 20 units, it's 10 units. So it's just, that's a way to think of it. It's not, you're not going to have, you might, but you probably won't have too many acre size parcels, although that's to be something that you're going to get into with the dimensional requirements. But yeah, for it to qualify under 40R, it would have to meet those minimum densities.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? If you don't mind.
Of course.
So I'm looking at your photo here, the single family attached. And then the duplexes and triplexes. Well, the duplex would also be considered a single family attached, wouldn't it? It's only 2 units. I mean, what's the difference in the two? Actually, what's the difference? I mean, in the first 3, they look pretty much the same. I mean, I think of a single family as a single house on a plot. That's it. The plot's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square feet. Once you start talking attached, I don't see any difference on whether it's a duplex, triplex, fourplex, sixplex. To me, that doesn't classify as a single family house on a plot.
I would say that with regards to single family attached, it's like typically you're like your condo. So sometimes, however, the developer wants to create legal parcel by which that building or the portion of a longer building that has the individual homes, that parcel would be drawn. So presumably you would treat that as a single family because it's 1 unit on one dwelling unit on, whereas a duplex or triplex is 2 dwelling units on 1 parcel.
So the parcel, it is murky. It's really strange. It honestly is. But the way that what I think Ken is trying to say is that like the single family attached, it looks like it's 1 building, but like at the parcel level, there's actual parcel lines that are splitting up
The building?
the building.
So there's no property line or anything.
No, that's what I'm saying is that there's a property line that's
But there's no
actually,
setbacks or anything like that because
Nope.
they're all attached.
you're right, exactly. Yeah. Yep. But technically that's a distinction is if it's on 1 parcel. But yes, in practice, your point is well taken that they look the same essentially, right? Or very, very similar. Yeah.
From a development standpoint, in thinking about it, in order for something to be developed significantly with cost structure in mind, density is really going to have to increase. Really going to have to increase. I don't see duplexes and triplexes and single family attached having any chance of being built without some huge subsidy from the government. If a developer is going to put something up, it's going to have to be very, very significant density, more like at least the 8 and maybe the 20 per acre. Buddy?
Curly Cash one. I'm loud enough. So if you take the 1 acre and you got to put 20 units on there, right?
doing math on that. I'm trying to visualize how tall that would have to be to have realistic apartments, I would assume in that, right? Are you going up 3 stories, 4 story? How tall does that have to be for 1 acre? Because that's not a lot of land to put 20 units on, right?
Yeah, we have that exactly kind of.
I don't know either. I'm trying to picture it in my head.
I mean,
3,000 square feet. Right, so if you assume 1,000 square foot dwelling, start adding the levels. Imagine. Yeah.
You got to pull setbacks, right? So
That'll allow for those setbacks and side setbacks.
I mean,
And parking.
right.
Until you adjust the zone. You have to allow for those setbacks until you adjust the zone.
Right. Until we get into the details of what is the appropriate setback for a multifamily in this mixed use or a center town district.
I will also say, this is coming in a little bit. We can scoot around if we want to, but we have some examples of dimensional regulations for different housing types. And I don't recall off the top of my head if we included the one for multifamily, that'd be 20 units, but I just my familiarity with other 40R bylaws, I think I've seen, like 40 feet as a height maximum. So it can be done. It doesn't require that you have, skyscrapers or anything like that. So, yeah, but
3 stories in the town?
So just curious, as an apartment, what are we normally looking at? 1,000 square feet? That's a pretty good size apartment.
Not even.
Yeah. 8.
So if you took 1,000 square feet, that's what, 43 per acre if it was all on the ground floor. So 20 if you went 2, which would end up covering half an acre. If you went 3 floors, it would cover what, a quarter of an acre?
Great way to.
About 10,000, 12,000 square feet. That gives you, again, it's only a ballpark, but.
Right. That's what I'm trying to.
It's a minimum of 3 floors to get to the 20 density.
Yeah.
Work out with
It's a
35.
minimum of 3.
Capped at 35 in the town, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So.
Well, so if we create a center town district, we're capped at what we choose
Yeah.
and what the council chooses to allow for the heights. Currently in industrial, it's 50 feet.
Yeah.
And portions of this used to be industrial, portions were business. Residential has always been 35 feet.
So just so I have it in mind, Ralph, did you say on 1/3 of an acre, have those 43 units at 1,000 apiece?
Technically, at 1,000 square foot a unit, 3 stories high, on roughly 12,000 square feet, you could do it. And again, that's assuming that every single apartment's 1,000 square feet. My whole house is only 1,180. So, 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. And I think there's minimum requirements. Don't we have to allow 1, 2, and 3 bedroom under 40R?
yes, that is true. Yeah.
So some would have to be a little bit larger, some could be smaller, some could be efficiencies.
Thank you.
From a planning standpoint, you have 20 units. How many parking spaces do you need? 40?
So that is coming up. That's not necessarily a given, actually. I think it depends on a lot of different conditions. So best practices in some cases will say 1 unit or 1 space per unit. But that's entirely up for you all to come to some conclusions about. But we're going to get there. That's coming up.
Just make a note that public comment will come later.
Just as a note, we'll be doing public comment a little bit later. But I just want to PVCP's point, these are all the things that we're going to be going through. So the bylaws that are in place right now aren't necessarily the bylaws that we're developing for the Centertown districts. Not saying that we're not going to adopt some of them, but that's the point of the process, so that we can kind of look at all of those things, parking and height requirements and all of that. So that's a part of this process.
Okay. Do you feel ready to move on?
Mhm.
Okay.
Everybody ready?
So now this is part two of the permitted uses question, mixed use and non-residential development. Seems like, very pro mixed use, which is great. And so the question is, what non-residential uses do you think should be allowed? Because you can really specify that. If you look again, I'm going to direct you to ask that explicitly, any of the following non-residential uses, and then we are asked to specify the permitted commercial, institutional, industrial, or other non-residential uses as part of a mixed use building. So it has non-residential. What should the non-residential consist of? So that's question one. And then the next question that's just sort of a follow-up for that is, should the allowed uses be different for mixed use versus standalone non-residential? Do you want to have standalone non-residential uses permitted? For example, retail uses that don't have a residential component. If so, what should those be? Should they be the same as the ones that are allowed as part of a mixed use development? Can they be different? Yeah.
Discussion. Might just want to discussion.
Under discussion? Yep, okay. Personally, I'm inclined to say that mixed use for me is the most enticing of non-residential uses. The more mixed use that we have, the better. If we are opening it up to more retail individual spaces without the mixed use component, then we're just kind of creating more of the commercial retail office spaces in our center town. And I really do think that the mixed use, the residential part of that, I think that is what's going to create the most walkability. It's going to create more tax revenue for our town. Putting people where the businesses are is, I think it's really important to consider that being the majority of what we put in the Centertown district.
What kind of businesses?
I mean, if we're looking at the kind of businesses that are up here, retail, office space, restaurants, cultural, institutional. I don't necessarily think, I don't know that I would say office space. I definitely think retail space. We have a ton of restaurants in our town. Maybe something other than a pizza joint would be great. But I think restaurants would be great. Community centers. I grew up in a town that had a really old theater that was really neat, had a stage, and the kids that did dance classes got to go out on the stage, and something like that would be really interesting in the center of our town. So I think I would be open to pretty much everything. I don't know that I would say office spaces, but I'm open to that idea.
I think if you travel around to communities where they have mixed use developments and there's some vibrancy, there's very few limits on what is put in place. So all the items on the list to me are appropriate and attractive. Someone wants to put a restaurant in and residential above it, or they want to put a doctor's office in, or they want to put, anything else in that they think will fly. That's what makes the area vibrant. So I would not restrict much of anything, maybe massage parlors or something like that. But all those listed on the board for sure.
I just tend to agree with that. Not being too prescriptive while sticking to sort of a set. I like those points up there for non-residential. So I'm basically in agreement with that point.
Nicole wants to be recognized.
Well, Hey, Nicole. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Nicole.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I was just going to concur with you actually that opting for mixed uses development would be preferred as it would effectively address some of the issues of housing shortages within the town. And also just, the restaurants would be a nice scenery for options for things to do around town. And of course, the retail stores would be nice as well. Some mom and pop shops.
Sure. You know what, without the microphone. So non-residential uses, how about a cemetery? That's non-residential use. I think this is what we're looking at. And when you start looking at a whole, I would say industrial uses. I don't think we want a self-storage or a warehouse or a distribution center there. I think what we're looking at is a very small selection. I mean, there's pages and pages here of different uses within our town. And I think it would be advent for us to literally go through this on our own and say, I like this, I don't like this. Because there's things in here that we just don't think of. Horse stable. Sorry, I don't think that should be in the center of our town. Again, for the horse lovers, I'm sorry, I apologize. But there's literally tons of stuff. And we have to question ourselves. Do we want like an indoor self-storage facility to be allowed in this district? I'm for, professional studios. I'm for, any type of the commercial, the retail aspect, because I think that helps us.
Right.
But again, once you start going out, machine shops, I mean, we've got a few little machine shops. Is that something that we think should be in the center of our town or not? I think what we're seeing here that's giving our choice, obviously, you're only allowed a little bit of room on a slideshow, and there's so much more to consider.
So Ralph, some of those are specifically industrial zoned properties, correct? Some of those that you were naming,
Uses.
those are industrial uses?
Some are industrial, some are business, some are commercial.
Right. So I think that's going to go to what we look at as, doing an overlay or doing a base zone, changing those, because then that'll help narrow it down. And then going through, I agree, going through and then starting to pick out and be a little more specific. I think that makes sense.
My thought, like you said, is you create a center town district with items within that you want to allow, that would exclude certain items that are listed under industrial, or even under, like you said, maybe we decide, hey, the center is not quite the place for a massage therapy salon. Maybe that should go out North Main Street or another bank. Again, but these are different things that I think we really need to actually take a list like this and say, no, that's a possibility, and go through.
So as a guidance for PVPC in drafting, would you want them to replicate the commercial and business uses that are presently allowed, and then allow the committee to amend and modify from there?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a very, very good idea, Ralph, to take all these things. I mean, I would have never thought to put a cemetery in the center town district, but
So the other, sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but I'm just looking, like, we have a community and public service uses, which has childcare facility. I don't think that's a bad idea to have somewhere in that area, especially if we're going to do a mixed use. People work. It would be nice to basically go down and say, okay, my kids are safe, and head off to work. So again, I think there's positives in a lot of the different areas that we have. I would definitely start with the business and commercial. Most of those uses looked pretty good that we can adjust. The same thing if we're gonna non-residential uses. What about like a home daycare? So, if we're gonna allow residential houses, are we gonna allow daycare facilities to be in them? These are all, this is a huge portion, and it's gonna be a huge chunk of our time deciding, hey, what we like, what we don't like. And no matter what we craft for a bylaw, we're going to forget stuff.
Right.
And it will have to be adjusted and tailored. And it's an ongoing process. That's why there's ways to change zoning bylaws. But I would definitely recommend most of the industrial uses come out. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think most people would
Can we take
agree.
all of the industrial, look through the list
Well-
and make sure.
Do we have a choice to either do it tonight or have the CPC group put together a list and then we color add from there?
Yeah, I think you want to give the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission some broad directives. So maybe it's we want the business, commercial, and public service uses in there and have them draft it. And then you could cull through it with more attention.
How much time you want to spend? I'll read each category and you guys can say yes or no.
I think
Got hours?
I think we can give them the information and have them compile it for us. And then it'll be easier for us to then sit down and take a look. And then I think that'll be easier for us to quickly just go through the list of uses.
And then Ralph, is there anything else that seems to have like a broad header or category that is worth entertaining?
So we've got general uses, which includes agricultural. I don't think we're going to look to put a garden or have a farm in the middle.
No.
But maybe a farmer's market would be allowed. So community and public service uses, we got commercial uses, business uses. Obviously, what we talked about, industrial uses, there's accessory uses, home occupation. So if we're going to allow residential, are we going to also allow them to have a home occupation out of there? I mean, that's most of it.
So would it be safe to say, just from a broader perspective, to give them at least somewhere to start, commercial uses that they can go through this and they can pull everything that's considered commercial. We don't want industrial necessarily. We can always add one, we can always one off, but if they're going through and they're pulling the broader.
If you don't mind, I would guess Pioneer Valley Planning, if they look through this, can pretty much guess the ones that are really going to be a no and pull those out.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I would ask them to do.
Yeah. And then whenever it comes back to us, then we can kind of go through it a little bit more detailed and
then we can say, well, I know it's allowed some places, but not in East Long Meadow.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have a kind of a follow-up question to your second question, should the allowed uses be different for mixed use versus standalone, which that question totally makes sense to me. But one of the things that I heard, I don't know, I think it was when we were on the 40R Zoom thing, we can kind of create this term is kind of like we can create sub-districts. I was going to say a Swiss cheese approach, if you will, where we can create sub-districts. And, obviously, if there's a district an area within the district that we feel heavily mixed use and another area that we're like, no, something more with the high density residential makes more sense, or something that is, as opposed to mixed use, a standalone makes more sense. Just kind of keeping that in mind for, allowing mixed use versus standalone non-residential. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all for all of it. We can kind of create something that fits for what our community wants.
But we don't definitely don't want to have one size fits all.
Right.
There's got to be flexibility built in to really make something work, and that's going to be attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so absolutely. You can definitely do sub-districting. That's a whole sort of other question where you get into really specific detail about what you want to see in very particular areas. But yes, to answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Yep. I just want to clarification on that.
And through the chair, I do think if we do a mixed use area or a building, that there will be different uses that you tend to allow in that as compared to a single residential unit. If someone lives in a single residential unit and they want to be, have a photographer studio in it, that's allowed now, I would say, yeah. If you switch to the mixed use, I'm not sure if I would be so apt to say, yeah, okay, we've got a commercial use down below, you got an apartment up above, and your room is going to be used for this. So I do think that there could be some differences there, depending on what we choose to allow in the zone.
And the last question, Ralph, is mixed use for like commercial versus other standalone non-residential. So, you know, to your point, if we have a standalone, that's a restaurant versus or a bar versus a mixed use bar or restaurant. So just trying to figure out. You want to live above a bar.
Maybe tonight.
Yeah, you show up. So I think that's something else that would be worth considering and talking about as a group.
Did that help?
Think so? Yeah, Kyle's here taking notes, so.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Okay, so do we feel pretty set on this for now?
Any other thoughts?
What about the issue of base versus overlay? I don't feel like we've come to a decision on that, and it seems like a fundamental detail, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good thing to talk about, base zoning versus overlay.
So what are we discussing? Are we discussing a bylaw with 40R, or are we discussing an overlay Centertown district over what we currently have?
I think
Or both?
I think we can discuss both, Ralph. We can discuss. I mean, there's obvious advantages to, I think, looking at it both ways, an overlay versus a base. The base we've talked about before, I think as a group, we've all kind of feel like the base zoning, especially with the industrial, that I think that would be advantageous to get that industrial out of there, and we're rewriting these bylaws. So I think that there's a real benefit to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, long term, the industrial just doesn't make sense in the center of town. So we don't want to take somebody has an industrial use currently and say you're out of business. But
I don't know that that's the case. They would be grandfathered in until and unless something changes.
Until they change the actual use.
Yeah.
Once the use is changed to something that's not industrial, then they can't go back to industrial.
yeah,
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, do you want me to say what I repeat?
go ahead.
So what I said is that anybody who is already industrial, if we did base zoning, it would not, they would be grandfathered in. It wouldn't change it out from underneath them until and unless they changed their use, or if it was sold, or and that use was changed to that point.
Yes, and my comment was that we don't want to take anybody's business and put them out of business for sure. So that's whatever way we go, we have to make sure that those who are using it for industrial use now have an opportunity to continue doing it. I think that's only fair.
And so, Carolyn, to your point, I would be more apt to not do an overlay because of the underlying industrial, and that we need to change what's allowed in this district, where an overlay allows all existing uses and you can do what's in the overlay. And again, that would defeat the purpose of removing the industrial zone. So,
Yeah, I think that's the way to go for the long-term benefit of the town.
Any other comments?
I agree.
Okay, I'll take agreement.
All right.
Okay, so gonna move on Well, I should have flipped to this slide. I guess this is where you're supposed to deliberate, but
Okay.
I'll move on to the next.
Yeah.
On to the next section. So this is just pulled directly from the 40R bylaw language, so I'll just read it out real quick. Without limitation, the smart growth zoning shall set out the dimensional use, parking, and other standards applicable to projects within a district, including within a substantially developed sub-district, including but not limited to height limits, setbacks, lot areas, lot dimensions, unit to lot ratios, floor area ratios, lot coverage ratios, and open space ratios. Just to head it off, we are not going to get to all of that tonight. And in fact, a lot of this conversation around dimensional regulations is going to be tied to a future conversation that is going to be had around design regulations. So in practice, dimensional and design regulations, they go hand in hand by necessity. So because we're not talking about design tonight, we're going to just kind of touch on some of the dimensional regulation questions. Okay. So this is really meant to just be a discussion for all of you, just to kind of start thinking about this question in more specific detail. So the question we have here to head off this is, what are the right dimensions for residential, mixed use, commercial, and business? What we did here, just as a starting point, is we pulled out the existing business district dimensional regulations. So we have two uses here, any permitted use and then residential use. So any permitted use except for residential use. And it has actually no minimum lot area as of right now. Minimum frontage of 100 feet for any permitted use, in residential 75, and you can read through them. So we have heights, maximum heights of 40 and 35. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to quickly flip to the next slide. This also this is I realize a lot, that's sort of the point as well, is that it's a lot. These are just some examples that we took from the town of Danvers MSTND district, which is a 40R district. And it just is intended to kind of demonstrate the sort of degree of specificity that you can get into with regard to all of these different types. So they break out, we just had 3 examples, but they do this for a number of different building types, use types. They specify mixed use buildings, general commercial buildings, row house and townhouses. And then for each of those uses, they have all of these different dimensional standards, right? And then as you can see, they also have design standards. So again, those are always going to be tied together in practice. But this is really just meant to be something to keep in mind for reference, just to know that, this is what it might look like, or something like this is possible. Whether or not you want to get into this level of detail, it's totally up to you. They did, but it's just a possibility. So that's really it, just to prime that discussion. So I'll leave it to you to start. Yeah.
Without going into the details yet, could you talk a little bit about the value of spelling out these details in terms of permitting?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So, when you have all of these details specified, that is just incredibly valuable for a developer, for example, who wants to come in, because they know, exactly what the standards are. It's all laid out very cleanly. It just makes the process, much easier. It speeds it up. It makes it simpler in a lot, it's simpler by providing complexity that, that the developer knows if they follow all these regulations, then that's going to work. That's going to meet the standards. So it's really important to make sure that you have all of this spelled out as clearly as possible, as clearly as you feel comfortable, to provide that information for developers as they're looking to build in the district. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
The more specification there is, better off it is. It's a roadmap for the developer, but also it's something that's been thought out in advance so that this district develops in a manner that makes the most sense. There's a lot of points to consider. But I think it's important to specify a lot.
Looking at these examples versus what our current specifications are, it feels like our current ones are very restrictive with the 100-foot setbacks, certain things. I would be curious to talk to the planning board, people in the planning board to find out, like where in our town is that? So I can get a visual, I'm a visual person, so I would like to see like, what are those 100-foot setbacks looking like? And then obviously we're going to go move forward into parking, but I know the parking specifications in our town are very restrictive as well. So I would want to see what those look like in our community to see how what the benefit, I think the benefit would, for this being less restrictive, is that we can get more onto a parcel. It seems to me, talking about density, being able to put more on a lot and not being as restrictive makes more sense, just on paper.
We definitely would have to look at a much different set of guidelines that exist today, but in the business district right now, I believe East Long Meadow has no setback on the rear yard and the front yard, I believe.
Can you flip that?
No,
Minimum frontage is 100 feet.
no, that's front.
That's a frontage.
Frontage
Minimum setback,
setback is
25 feet,
25 feet.
rear yard and side yard is
Are none.
none.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are a lot of buildings in town right now that are set up that way, that are in the center of town and other areas.
I misread that, so I apologize.
That's okay. But that would have to change too, the 100-foot frontage, There's not a lot of parcels that would qualify.
Mhm. Any thoughts?
I think most of our business properties qualify for 100-foot frontage.
But if we're looking,
Maple Court.
if we're looking at creating density with mixed use, we may not, it depends,
Yeah.
depending on the
Yeah,
developer,
exactly.
they may not be able to accomplish that 100-foot frontage if they're looking to go up as opposed to out, or, so it just might be, we might have to look at those numbers. I think it's something we're just got to discuss.
Yeah.
Oh,
So what I would say is, depending on, again, like they said, the design, and what we choose to have a look for the center of town is really going to drive a lot of these dimensions. I've seen many areas, I've been up to Portsmouth, Portland,
Yeah.
where the buildings are basically, you have the street, the sidewalk, which is 5-6 feet wide, and then the building. I've always loved those places. Does that work in the center of our town? I'm not sure if it would. I think that's a discussion to have, what type of design, feel, and look that we really want. And again, I think that's really going to drive what we choose to do.
Is there anything that distinguishes the setback from the sidewalk? Or do you build in sidewalks separately from the setback? How do you build in that feature?
So currently the setback is, just so everyone can hear me, if I understand correctly, currently the setback is from your front lot line. The sidewalk is typically owned by the town, so your lot line probably starts somewhere right after the sidewalk. And again, that's why I would look at this and say, in some areas right in the Rotary, I mean, we right now already have buildings that are set up like that. I know the Chase Bank building, I know everyone loves it. They love the color. That had to go for a variance because of how close to the road it was, but the pre-existing building was pretty close. I think they moved it back a foot or two, so they received the variance, but pretty close to the sidewalk when you look at it.
mhm.
Well, on Shaker, on the east side of Shaker, you know, there's buildings that are right on the sidewalk right now, so.
Mhm.
Takes me a bit. I gotta
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
You know, I think this is it's a very important design consideration to try to get these right. But if we can get it done, it's a nice roadmap for any developer to come in and see, okay, this is what has to be met, and we can either do it or we can't do it.
So Mayor, one more.
Yep.
Sure.
So I think one of the easier things to talk about is the heights of the buildings. So currently, I believe we have, as they said, business, residential, commercial, and industrial. Industrial allows up to 50 feet. I believe, if you double check me, but I believe it's 50-foot high. You know, business is what, 40 or 45, and then residential's 35. So I think that's something that the board looks at. Hey, this is the middle of our town. Gonna put a limit on it of 40 feet for mixed use. Are we gonna go as high as what the industrial would have already allowed, 50 feet? Again, I think that's a choice and consideration for the board. And it may depend on what type of building that you're actually putting in.
Yeah, I agree on the height restriction, very important. It would be interesting to know what the Mario's restaurant building is. That seems to me to be one of the tallest buildings in town right now. And I don't know if it's 40 or 45 feet, whatever it is. But yeah, it's important. Again, I think from a density standpoint, you don't want to go too high, but you don't want to go too low either.
I feel like what I brought up about the sub-districts, I think that this is where sub-districts would really come in to play for our community. You were talking about Shaker and that corridor, what fits along that southern part of our map that we drew isn't necessarily going to be what is going to be appropriate for the area around the center fields. It's not necessarily going to be what's going to be appropriate around the center square, behind center square, going up. I always get the road wrong. Not Baldwin. Is it Baldwin? Yeah. Okay. You know, what's back there. So what's appropriate for one area in this Centertown district is not going to be appropriate for others. So I think for our purposes, I really do think that sub-districts are going to be what we're ultimately going to end up looking at. And correct me if I'm wrong, even the design standards, heights requirements, setbacks, all of that we can specify for each of those sub-districts. Yeah. So I think to Ralph's point, where, you know, we don't want something right on the road at the Rotary, but maybe on Baldwin, that might be something that is appropriate. So, okay. Any other thoughts?
I'm sure. Just to add to that, so I'm not personally, convinced that sub-districts are something that need to be defined right now. But I think that also leads to a related point, which is that beyond, some of these regulations, I think the town has some work to do in the future, sort of defining how the public spaces that it controls, separate from private property are going to look, right? Things certainly will change from where they are today. And I think that will play a big part in defining what makes sense. Where is Shaker Road going to look the same in 10 years, 20 years? Who knows, right? So that's my reticence to really support sub-district discussions right now, personally.
Okay.
Are you thinking that just from a height standpoint, that it should be highest in the center, or are you thinking something else? When you're talking about sub-districts, I'm just.
Oh, like specifically?
Yeah.
I would say no, not highest in the center. You know, we all think about center as the Rotary. And if we were to put something, that we, you know, set our industrials 50 feet, if we were to stick something right there on the Rotary at 50 feet, I think that would be a pretty drastic something as you're driving into town and you're driving into the Rotary. But if you're at the brewery, there's those lots that are back there behind the brewery. That might be something that's a little more appropriate for something that has a little more height. Maybe that's where you put a 2-3 story apartment complex or something that's not right on our street. It's set back, but it's still in that district. That's kind of where I see the sub districts coming into play, is being able to say, we do want height and more density in some areas where we want more mixed use. We still want the density, but different kinds of density in different areas. That's what I envision the sub districts being able to accomplish. It's still density. It's just choosing where we want that density to be.
Would we want the tallest buildings right on the street anywhere? I would think it would be better for them to be off the street, set back somewhere with a little lower height on the street, regardless of whether we're on Baldwin or Shaker or Maple.
Yeah, I mean, so like talking about density, if we had a mixed use 2-story, did I pop?
It sounds good now.
If we're talking about mixed use 2-story, or even a 3-story along Shaker Road that's sandwiched between Shaker and the rail trail, that doesn't seem like it's that high when you think about it in your head. I don't know how tall those buildings are now. I think most of those are pretty low level. So, maybe there is a 2-story mixed use on Shaker. But again, to your point, I don't know that the highest whatever we choose, I don't know that needs to be right there in the center of your thing.
So I'm not sure if this is even possible, but let's say we go through and set a height of 40 feet. That's pretty much what the business zone is now. That's pretty much what they can do. And you say, okay, 40 feet, but if you want to go higher, you can come in under a special permit and prove your case, and then let the planning board choose whether or not they want to go higher based on where they're located. I know by right, we have to allow a certain height and all, but if they want to go above and beyond that, there should be a mechanism to allow that.
Is that something that we would then, could we write that into the bylaw?
That would go into some of the later sections 9 through 12.
Okay.
Are your procedural sections of the bylaw.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Then you're right to make that threshold of this is what is permitted by right for any developer, and to exceed those parameters, there's a special permit process.
Okay. Did everybody hear him say that, what he said? He said, so, cause just keep it on the mic. So, those are all things that we can write into the bylaw. We can add those provisions that if somebody did come in after the fact and wanted to build something higher, that there would be a process for that. We can write that in within the bylaws.
I'm going to ask a question related to, if I can. So asking another question related to the setbacks. So it seems that you'd want something proportional is what I hear the committee saying. So like the higher the building, the more set away from the street, or the sidewalk you'd want it to be. So how do you build in, I asked the question, how do you build in sidewalks, but how do you build in green spaces or lawns or some sort of greenway alongside of the buildings? Is that in setbacks or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, so that's actually great. That's the next part of this.
Look at that. Great segue.
And so to start to answer the question, I think that there is some creative flexibility here, but you might say, for example, projects above a certain size potentially have to dedicate, a certain percentage of the land area to a specified public amenity or open space provision, like a pocket park or something, really, like you can be creative in thinking about what that looks like. And you can specify, sort of it would be probably it would look like it would be sort of on a project by project basis to some extent if you're talking about where exactly it might be on the project site, but you could definitely include regulations about that as well. So the question here is how much space, if any, should each project provide, but that could also, we can tailor that in many, many different ways. Projects above a certain size, like I said, for example, are there specific types of open space or public amenities that you want to see? For example, pocket parks, plazas, play areas. We have here, tree-lined streets, that sort of thing that could be in sort of a small front setback area. Bring that up for discussion.
Personally, we have a lot of parking lots in our community, and I would love to see more green space. I would love to see a requirement that these new developments have green space associated with them in some way. I think it's a really important, especially for people who are, the tree-lined streets and the green alleys and trying to encourage people to move to a space that has density to give them that green space so that if you're living in a dense space, an apartment complex, that you do still have a feel of a yard or someplace that you can go.
When I think of the town and the different neighborhoods and Shaker and the center of town, I agree, you don't see a lot of what's shown there. And that does look very attractive, and it would be very nice if it can be incorporated in, but it's not easy to do, especially from an economic standpoint, to have too much of this. And we don't really have it anywhere in town. There are very few places that do. But if you go to Mattoon Street in Springfield, they're all row houses that were built in the 1800s. You have that exact look of the tree-lined street. The trees were planted and they had a sidewalk. There are no yards, but it is a very attractive setting. Most people would say, gee, if we could build that in East Long Meadow, that'd be pretty nice. But in today's economic world, it's going to be real tough to do a lot of that. I can tell you that. There's not too many Mattoon Streets that you see around anywhere.
Yeah.
So regarding some of the green spaces, is one of the approaches, this is just a question, is one of the approaches there that perhaps for developments of a certain size, you're asking them to, in that parcel, set aside space for a plaza or some sort of green area as part of their plan?
That's an example of something that you could definitely do. Yeah, you could make that kind of specification, regarding project size or,
I guess you guys knew I had something to say. So I think the thing is, we're here to try and set a vision for possibly what the town could look like in 30 or 40 years. All of these parcels are privately owned, And we're not saying that they're going to be redeveloped overnight, because that's not being truthful. But what we are saying is, as they get redeveloped, if, like the Chase building, it was completely torn down and rebuilt, these are some conditions that we could ask for to make that area look better. And then when the building next to it gets done, they could do it. And then the next one. And then when grandkids are here, they'll look and say, wow, someone really had the forethought to think about this. But this is not something, and I don't want people to think that, hey, in 10 years after this approved, everything's going to look like this with, lined streets and little pocket parks, because that's probably not going to happen.
And to Jason's point, we're not asking the town to do these things. We're not going to the town and saying, we want the town to line the streets with 100-year-old trees and start putting all these beautiful planters up. It's like Ralph said, it's a vision for what could be possible for the future of the town. I think that's beautiful. I think
It'd be nice.
it would be nice. Yeah.
Very nice. And when you look at this, when you look at development, to have a significant development take place is going to require a significant amount of land. It's not going to be the purchase of one or two lots that are owned by individuals right now. They're, for a development to take place like we're talking about, requires a fair amount of space. And that it's tough to cobble together a bunch of properties. We have a few large spaces. The place across from Lennox is one of those, but we don't have a lot of them. And so, that's another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the long-term development of the town. And I'm not trying to minimize anything that's been said or point us to being not careful with what we put in place. I think we have to be extremely careful to what we put in place so that the development over the next 10, 20, 30 years does work. But it has to give a developer an opportunity to do it right as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I do want to, I guess, question that a little bit in the sense that I'm really in favor of making it possible for incremental development for smaller pieces of land, for smaller scale developers to build in a way so that we're getting a nice mix. I don't think anybody wants really large, monolithic developments that take over a significant portion, for example, of town. I think it would be a healthier pattern to see more incremental, smaller scale and, development take place over time. At least that's how I feel about it. And I know there are challenges to that, and that's not necessarily solved with zoning reform alone. I think there's other initiatives our town leadership can take over time to make that happen. But that's just part of the way I'm looking at what we're trying to set in place here.
Oh, I'm done. Yeah, I'm good.
So I think what I'm hearing is that related to the size of the development, different requirements should be required for these green spaces. So if it's a larger development, it can afford to create something like a pocket park. But otherwise, I think you want to be building in the tree-lined streets because that's more of the neighborhood parcel scale that can become continuous over time. Yeah, if I'm not capturing that right, let me know.
Yeah, that's that's my view of it. Yeah.
So it would be in relation to size. So the green requirements would be tiered by size.
Yeah, I mean, that's doesn't make sense to me.
Speak up,
Yeah, I do think it makes all the sense in the world to have different requirements for different size projects. And I'm not advocating all big projects. There are a lot of small parcels and they do have to be upgraded and improved as well. That they're not going to become part of a big project. So I would agree with that.
Just to recap, what Rebecca was saying is, what she was recapping that what we're asking is, depending on the size of the project, might dictate or might change what we're looking for. So a larger development might be able to handle a pocket park, where something that is smaller scale, single parcel, that might just be something like that's the tree lined street where they're required to do smaller beautification along the streets. Okay.
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 Keep moving.
Next.
All right.
What else you got?
So now we're going to dive into, well, yeah, again, touch on, not really dive into, but not too specifically, but we're going to touch on parking requirements. So the leading question is, what's the appropriate balance between having enough parking and avoiding excessive paved areas? Okay, and then this is a reference. These are some of the existing parking requirements for off-street parking that East Long Meadow currently has in its zoning code. So we have each single family dwelling, one space or garage. I'm not going to read through it. I mean, you can read through it here. But then this is really just intended to, again, provide a little bit of context. We just pulled out a few of these uses because they seem like uses that might, be desirable in this district. We left out manufacturing and those sorts of uses, which we kind of figured you probably wouldn't want to see too much of or any of in the district. But yeah, this is really, and then I guess I can also just to sort of prime this as well, shared parking. One sort of typical thing that you see with this kind of district is a shared parking areas that can be used by different types of uses, commercial, residential, and they can overlap in those uses because the prime periods of time where certain businesses are active will depend on those businesses. For example, like a bar will see, its highest traffic at a different time probably than a barber shop, for example, right? So it's just, that's something to consider as well. That's a way that is typically used to, allow for enough parking without overwhelming the center town district with parking lots. Okay, so number two.
Do we currently have single family dwelling? Do we currently have something on our books for multifamily
No.
parking? No. Okay.
The mixed use village has a parking requirement though.
It's
That's
completely
different.
different. Yeah.
That's
Mixed use village is something set off on its own, which will probably never happen. So
But what was that required spaces? What were the required spaces there?
I believe it was one per bedroom. Was the minimum.
the mixed use village.
Yes.
So we also did on the mixed use village, we put in some language that basically said that although you may need this many parking spaces, let's say half of them you can keep as green space if you can prove that they're not all needed. And that way there we got the best of both worlds, we thought, where if you're not having it as a parking lot, then you have it as green space. And at least that way there down the road, what would happen is if you all of a sudden needed additional spaces because you didn't have enough, well, that area could be used because it had originally been designated for parking. But one of the points I wanted to bring out is I know the current library, town hall, and that facility, like where Center Square Grill and all is, that is shared parking right now with a separate rate based on the fact that like the town hall, the employees are there during the day, where most of the restaurant's traffic comes after 4 o'clock at night when there is no employees in town hall, or, well, actually, there are some, but a lot less. And I think that's what we really need to start looking at, is some ability for shared, and not only shared on that parcel, but currently we don't allow like a business to allocate parking spots in, let's say, the neighbors or down the road. And we may consider, within a certain area that you can have shared parking. Again, the businesses would have to agree to it, but, and that way there, if one business is only open at night, the other's open during the day, they can share it.
Parking is going to be really crucial because it's important and it's needed, but it takes up a heck of a lot of space. And you see the bylaws currently where 1,000 square feet of retail needs, was it 5 spaces? 6 spaces. So 10,000 square foot building needs 60 spaces. To give people perspective, everybody knows the Chapter Lane Kitchen building. That's 5,000 square feet on each floor. So that's 10,000 square feet. That needs 60 spaces. Well, it doesn't have 60 spaces. There's virtually nothing that meets those requirements in town except perhaps Big Y's parking lot and Stop and Shop. And even Stop and Shop probably goes on the shared space thing. So the parking has to come down to the lowest possible denominator, I think.
I would definitely agree. I already said we have a lot of parking spaces. There are a lot of blacktop in our town. I know that parking is important, but I like the idea of being able to give people options and saying, have some green space, and if we absolutely need to, just trying to figure out how to make that work and make it something that's attractive to a potential developer. That would be my biggest concern, is making sure that it's not just lots of parking lots.
Carol? I feel like, probably don't want me using that thing, pull people out of here. It feels like you need to figure out the parking situation first, to then back into your green space, back into your setbacks. Because if you're going to require parking on site, that's going to be very difficult to get your setbacks with those kind of requirements, and then also including green space, right? So if we can nail down the parking regulations, then you can figure out if there's opportunity for green space, and then you can figure out if there's anything left for setbacks. It feels like this has to go in reverse.
I'm going to throw one out for the board. Actually, you guys can talk parking garage. What's the thought process? I mean, I wouldn't want one in the Rotary. But if we let's say the end where Home Lumber was, where you have access to the rail trail, 2-floor parking garage or something. And again, this is just for talking purposes.
I said that from day one.
Yeah, I mean, from a principal standpoint, I would say I would like to start with letting developers decide how much parking they need. They're pretty good at estimating that, I think, and dictating it with a table like this. I don't think has served our town well at all. We have tons of wasted space, as others have mentioned, and that's value, right? That space could be used for more valuable purposes. But I think the town also needs a strategy on parking. So something like a garage, policies for on-street parking. So I think everyone's fears that there will be traffic jams or that they'll be driving around without a place to put a car. But I think with smart planning and guidance for developers, it's totally feasible, and it can be minimized so that the focus can be on uses for the land.
Parking garages are tough. Who's going to pay for the parking garage?
It's a revenue generator.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I'll be candid about it. If there's additional development in the Center Square district, there's going to be additional traffic. Yeah. End of story. It's not going to make it easier. It's going to make it harder. But there are some potential spaces that can be considered that the town does own currently. So it is a very tough one. It's a really tough problem. But the other thing I'll say is all the towns that are vibrant with little downtowns or bigger downtowns, whether it's West Hartford, Connecticut, or New Canaan, Connecticut, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or Northampton, there's parking problems and there's traffic problems. And that's what means it's vibrant. When it's empty and there's plenty of spaces, you have no life down there. So if we want a more vibrant town, it comes with some goods and bads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think this is one of those issues that, can adjust and change over time as well. I would not want to write in restrictive, excessive parking at this early stage. I think the town leadership can make adaptations over time if, the best outcome and it drove more people and more activity.
Encourage having minimums, having.
Yeah, to your point, Jason, that's always something that can be edited down the road. It's not something that we as a committee have to say, we don't have to be so restrictive. And if it's something that we see as becoming a problem, we can always change it over time. Or they can change it over time.
So the one thing with parking is if you make it too restrictive, it's very easy to go the other direction. If you don't make it restrictive enough, there's no land left because they've developed the whole thing. So it's easy to go one way, it's hard to go the other way. But with that being said, and to Steve's point, vibrant community, no matter what, no matter how many parking spaces you put in. I mean, I look at Center Square Grill, I'm literally parking in the library's parking lot because it's so busy, which is fantastic. That's a good problem to have, but I can still find a spot somewhere. And, I think we have to encourage businesses and all to allow, people that are going to be going to their next door neighbor's business to be able to park in their lot. And I think that's something that shared parking is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask a question of the PVPC. So under shared parking, is there a way to require, if the municipality created a parking garage, could the developers be responsible for maintaining a certain number of spaces or paying in lieu of taxes fee for spaces in a municipal garage? Is there something that would create a private sort of revenue stream for this public amenity?
I don't think that would be covered under the town's 40R regulation. I think it might be something that you would discuss as the town is exploring, if the town is exploring a parking lot and you have maybe a developer that's interested.
Mm-hmm.
And you have those conversations. I'm not aware of any examples in Massachusetts where the developer has shared costs of development or even maintenance of a parking lot, parking garage. I could foresee if you were to think of Thorne's Marketplace in Northampton that connected straight to the garage from the building. I don't know if there's an agreement between the marketplace and the city of Northampton who's maintaining that garage. But I think that's something to explore.
Mm-hmm. So in case anyone had trouble hearing Ken, he said that's not something you would write into the bylaw, but something that would have to be negotiated as a sort of public-private partnership. And so that would be explored on a case-by-case basis as opposed to written into a pro forma in the code.
How much more do we have to go through? This is it.
Parking is it?
Public comment.
It's very important to get the public's comments.
Okay, so that was it for parking? Okay. So at this time, I think we're gonna go ahead and take a motion to open floor for comments.
So
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, all right.
Name and address.
I'm gonna ask you if you could please stand up, state your name and oh, I'm not gonna go that way. Say your name and address.
I'm a resident. Were you coming to me? I didn't see anybody.
It's for Hellcat too.
Traffic, that's all I want to say.
Name and address for the.
We have a
Name
severe
and
issue.
address.
Ernest Gagnon,
You just.
24 Tamarack Drive, Saw Meadow. We already have a severe traffic issue with the rotary. If you're driving home when school is getting out or at 5 o'clock, you are waiting and waiting and waiting.
Aiden.
Half a mile before the rotary, half a mile after it. It seems like this has not been addressed. Everybody says, well, you know, that's a good thing to have a vibrant community. That means it's busy, but we all know that there's places that we avoid because of that reason too. So it can be a double-edged sword. We have to consider the traffic. Thank you.
Brown, Overlook Drive. You know, it wasn't long ago, Ralph will remember this, that we had a group of people in front of the town council and the planning board, and they were making their case for keeping their backyard chicken coops. And part of that discussion was the rural heritage of our town, trying to hang on to what was left. We still have a few farms, we still have a little bit of rural area, but not a lot. A year later, we've gone 180 degrees and we're talking about how to urbanize Center Square area with high density housing, more traffic, something that's concerned with me. I don't want East Long Meadow. I'm a 30-year resident. I don't want East Long Meadow to become another West Hartford. I don't want us to be another Northampton. I don't think anything high density is good for East Long Meadow. And I just want you to keep in mind when you're discussing this, we're talking about the town of East Long Meadow. It's not the city of East Long Meadow. We're a town. And I think a lot of
That flag, I have 37 pages. Just curious. Discussions we've had on increased infrastructure requirements that are going to go along with this.
Well, it's not, we'll get to the responses afterwards.
Okay. We'll respond to everything after, once we hear all the questions.
The answer to that.
I think that's answering everything at the end. Getting all the questions.
Nora Diane, 46 Glendale Road. I have a couple of things. Concerning a property rates increased usages. You would be charging someone to use that parking garage, and then they have to not have parking spaces. More than likely, if they're 1,000 square feet, approximately anywhere from 1 to 3 bedroom, they use something up. Maybe not want them to have a car. I don't think that's realistic, especially if it's more than 1 bedroom unit. And you're going to make them walk from a parking garage that they have to pay for to go to wherever this housing may be. So that would be one major concern. We haven't heard anything about affordable housing and how it's going to be affected
Speak up.
I think,
Yeah.
There you go.
yeah, you gotta put it like in your mouth.
Right.
Next question, parking garage. Have to pay for a parking garage and walk the units. Have enough parking. I definitely don't think we should be able to.
Should have parking for residential.
Any kind of development that happens, regardless of what the development is. Should be discussed.
I mean, if the garage is at all.
Also, I was interested if anybody on the committee has had any discussion with developers about what kind of idea they have aesthetically and what kind of cost investment that they are willing to make. One of you mentioned smaller units versus obviously making it an expansive development. To me, that's kind of like, I wouldn't want to see inconsistency. So if you are using developers that are only interested in doing a smaller unit, and you have somebody that maybe would be interested in doing something larger, then is there any way to control the aesthetic that would be involved for what they're doing? As I said, have anybody had any discussion with anybody concerning potential development, how they.
Roland Bowler from 110 Smith Avenue. Talking about parking, it's all about who you're trying to attract. If you're gonna have 10 families basically in one building and you're gonna have 10 parking spots, who's going to afford that apartment or condo or whatever you're going to call that living facility? You're gonna need two incomes for the type of people you want to attract to your town. With two incomes, you better have two cars. And you said only one parking spot per family. Doesn't work. So now if you're gonna use a parking garage, what about security? We can't keep our own cars secure in this town because people outside of this town are coming in and robbing us blind. How are you gonna keep this town secure when you're parking one car at your apartment, condo, whatever, and then one somewhere else, which is most likely gonna be on the street? So security is a major issue for those people coming in. Once they see it, they're not gonna come. So build it, they'll come. Don't build the parking lots, they won't. So who are you trying to attract is what I'm wondering. Because with only one parking spot per living space, it just doesn't work.
You can take.
You also talked about the 100-foot frontage or a setback. If you're gonna use a 100-foot setback, I'm thinking of some properties that are actually around the Rotary. If you're gonna use a large setback, are you going to make that person's property obsolete for the next builder? Are you gonna shorten whatever they're going to put up by trying to add green space in the front of it? So I think you're gonna change that person's parcel by saying, now you cannot build where the other building was, we need you to put it further back. The other one was 100-foot frontage in front of it, and you were talking about making that smaller. Would that apply to the entire town? Because you just changed the square footage needed to put up a home in town, because right now it's 100 foot for square footage for the homes in front of their home, not square footage, 100-foot frontage to put up a home on a sidewalk.
Hi, Phil LaRosa from Harwich Road. At the onset of this meeting, we talked about business district. And it consists of, was it 94 or 97 acres?
96.5 is.
That's close enough to 97. Can you tell me of that 97, what land is available now that you won't have to disrupt anything? Isn't there really only one big parcel available for development?
No.
So you're asking.
Of the 97 acres.
Right.
How much
that you.
underdeveloped or used?
What's available now for
We had it.
development?
Probably.
What doesn't have a home or business on it right now?
How zoning work?
I'll help you with it. It's only one parcel that's available. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? This plan is years and years down the road. And folks, God bless you for volunteering, but you have to think, talk like business people. If you start to design the box and you make the developer fit in the box, that's not very welcoming. You should probably do it the other way around. Say to developers, what ideas do you have? Here's the land that might be available. And what ideas might you have about it? And the planning board and town council will meet on it. If you're starting to design a box that they gotta fit in, again, they're business people. They're not gonna come in if it doesn't make sense.
Let's take one more question and then try to answer some of the points that were made or address them in some way.
Bob Dovin, Sorry we drive. Bob Dovin.
I have a couple.
We hear you. We hear you.
Long Meadow, we've been here 60 years. I just like to make a comment. The planning board has done a wonderful job. 60 years, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Very
good.
Yep.
Hand it off to you now.
You want to start?
Yeah, I just have a,
You're the chair.
so first, I just want to clarify, the 100-foot setback, that was my, misspeaking. When I was reading the chart, we flipped through it really quick. The 100-foot setback was, that's not what was up there. It's a 100-foot frontage on commercial. It was, 25-foot setback, if I remember.
Business.
Go to it if you.
The business, yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So that was, my misspeaking, not a 100-foot, it's 25-foot, setback. It is a 100-foot frontage. So I just wanted to clarify that, for you.
He also asked if anything would apply to the whole town.
Yes, and then as far as the, anything applying to the rest, any changes that we make here applying to the rest of the town, the purpose of this center town district is that this district that we've drawn out is specifically this district. So the bylaw that we are creating, the draft bylaw that will then go to the planning board and then go to the town council, that is for this district. Anything that is changed outside of this district it's going to go through the same process that any other changes would make. It would go through the planning board and it would then go through the town council. That's not what we're doing here. So we are specifically only talking about this mapped area that we've carved out. And then just one more thing, the parking spots. I know that that's kind of a sore subject. My mom lived in a community in Washington, D.C. It was a high rise right next to the Pentagon, and every unit got one parking spot, and there were only a handful of units that, or handful of second spots that units could purchase. I understand that parking is a big concern, and that hopefully, to Jason's comment, would be something that a developer would be able to have answers for. What we're doing now as far as parking is it's not necessarily working, in my opinion. Obviously, as a committee, we're going to talk further. And that's kind of what's great about the committee, is that we're going to take a vote and then it'll go to the planning board, and the planning board will then make decisions. And then once the planning board makes decisions, then it'll go to the town council and the town council will then make decisions. So whatever it is that we're working on now, it might be what ends up at the end. We're gonna try that again. It might be what ends up on the end and it might not be. So as we're talking through things, we appreciate your comments and we're taking those into consideration, but we're still working through a lot of that stuff. Did you want to
Go ahead and answer the questions.
you had a
If you
couple?
need help going through the questions, I can help.
I have a few.
Infrastructure. So a couple of them that were talked about was infrastructure. Yes, there are some infrastructure that's underway. Currently, we've received a grant to work on North Main Street with all the lighting and everything. The state has just announced roughly a month or so ago that the repaving of Summers Road from the Rotary all the way to the Connecticut line, the state is going to pay for, along with Prospect Street from the center all the way to the Connecticut line. We've looked at sidewalks. We have a sidewalk fund, what we can do to improve them. But let's face it, our rotaries are rotary, and that's why we were in Ripley's, believe it or not. I know the DOT has looked at it. We're hoping to see if there's any improvements without taking everyone's land to put something, overpasses or something in, which would never happen. So, we're sort of limited to what we have, and we have to work within that. We already have the businesses and all here. As far as the land use, you're right. There's one lot that doesn't have anything, but that's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is giving the ability to the owners of the parcels to be able to make changes down the road. Acres Power Equipment is a great example. We saw the building's been sold. They've completely redone the entire building. Well, that would have been nice if we had a Centertown district to where we could have given them options and said, hey, listen, we'd like a small green space put in front instead of the parking all the way to the building. And I'm not saying that's what we would ask for, but I'm saying this is examples. The Chase building was just redone. When we look at values, they paid an exorbitant amount of money for that because it was right in the center of town. They didn't care that they had limited parking. They knew that that was a spot that was going to be high visibility, and that's the one that they wanted. If we had said to them, hey, you have to put this green right of way in and plant 15 trees, guess what? They would have put the green in, they would have planted the 15 trees. So what we're looking at is creating a bylaw that says, hey, going forwards, this is how we want the town to start appearing. So if you're going to buy a building and tear the whole thing down and redo it, guess what? You got to meet these design criterias. I believe we're in the process now, Rebecca, if I'm overstepping, of looking for members for the design review committee, which is mandated in our bylaw that new developments and all may go through the design review committee once we get one, which again, we have to set parameters of what we want it to look like so that we don't have purple lighting shining into the Rotary. We don't have stuff that we don't want. And years ago, we did this, and that's how we got all of the Z-brick in the center of town. Slowly over the years, all of a sudden, we stopped mandating it. Well, if we mandated it, guess what? Over at Chase, you would have had all brick sidewalks, all new. If you don't mandate it, you're going to get the cheapest thing. If they could have done asphalt walk, they would have, to save money. Like I said, so you have to come up with the regulations. We have to, as a town, of what we want this to look like, and then go forwards from there. Thank you.
There's a question of affordability, why we haven't talked about it tonight.
The question about affordability, we haven't talked about it because we haven't gotten there yet. That is much further down the road as far as the bylaw goes. So we just haven't gotten to it yet. We're trying to take, it's a rather lengthy draft bylaw. So we're trying to take it in smaller chunks because we've already been here 2.5 hours. So if we tried to go through it all tonight, we would be here for a couple of days. So to answer your question about the affordable piece. What else?
Rural character. This,
What was that?
Rural character. Rural development.
Yeah.
Concentrated.
The rural character.
I do want to make one comment. Yeah, so regarding the comment on preserving open spaces, I certainly respect that one. Everything that's in this district has already been developed to fully developed. There's very little left there that's open. So I'm all in favor of, and anyone who's been on planning, I think, or Conservation Commission or other groups has seen, subdivisions going up where on the outskirts of town where open space, farmland or forested areas are being just paved over, right? And I think those are the areas I would love to be able to save to some extent in this town by doing this planning and putting the development where development has already happened and can be reworked. So that's my philosophy on that point.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, but part of this is also, we have our center field. So talking about green space, I'm a local youth softball coach. Center field is something that I very much want to make sure that is maintained. I think it's important that we maintain those green spaces, and having it in Centertown District, it's something that we can preserve and maintain and keep. Thank you, Tom. Were there any others?
There's traffic. Sorry. Go ahead.
There's a conversation with developers and specific projects.
Yeah, and maybe Steve, you could speak to the idea of designing the box first and then having the developer come in as opposed to the developer.
Good luck with that one.
Well, my friend Phil LaRosa posed the question of designing the box first and having the developer fit in the box. Yeah, that is always a problem. And it's what we do have to be careful of. There should be discussions with either experienced developers or potential developers to get an idea what they're thinking. I do think it's a good suggestion.
So with regards to fitting in the box, every town that I know of in Massachusetts has zoning bylaws. The zoning bylaws set out what you can and can't do in certain areas, whether you can only do residential, whether you can do business. And I think if you're calling it a box, that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to create a new box to allow different things to happen within the center of town. Including, in my opinion, I would love to see a small development like what's in Wilbraham. I believe Perfumi just did it. It's right on Main Street, isn't it? And it's a mixed use. And again, something like that, I think the character of that would fit in. I think we also have to look at the design and what this town wants. I mean, I go to the Cape and everything looks just so because that's the zoning that was put in place so that each thing, I mean, you go by a McDonald's and there's no great big M because they won't allow it. And that's really what we want to do. We want to create a look, a feel for the town that allows certain things, but doesn't allow other things. And signage is usually a huge one. These flashing lights or these signs that are 8 or 9 foot tall in the middle of town, I personally don't think would work. And I hope the center district would agree with that. But again, there's still a box that you're creating, but you want to be able to work with developers. Well, that's really the box that you're working within because the zoning requirements allow, all different types of, hopefully it'll allow different types of developments, whether it's a commercial, a mixed use or whatever. And then you got to work with the developer, and that's where a design review committee really helps.
Oh, it's still in.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback off of that, with this process, by creating this box, it helps to expedite the development. We're giving these developers a roadmap to say, this is what we want, this is how we want it, and they can come in and they can look at it and they can say, I can meet those specifications. So if we are as detailed as possible, even with, I think, if I remember correctly, you were asking questions. I apologize, I can't remember your name. Asking questions about the design, right? So being able to do that all through this and creating that box of even going as far as design and what it should look like and all of that, then that expedites that development.
I actually wanted to know if anybody on committee has had any even casual conversation with any developers about potential looks, potential placement, you know, any, everything you've discussed tonight about what's on the table. And obviously not to make arrangements or anything like that, but have you spoken with any potential developers about what they might have for space? They might think would be something they'd like to invest in. I'm not trying to suggest that anybody's made any kind of behind the scenes arrangements, but I think it's normal human behavior to have discussions, especially if you know people in those positions at those businesses that may be interested in investing in the town and being a part of this process.
I'll say from a planning board standpoint, thank you, Bob, by the way, for the shout out. So put that on my year-end review, myself a raise, but from a planning board, I appreciate it, we're in the town budget. From a planning board perspective, right? So I understand your side of things, but from our side of things, you know, when a certain bank comes to town or go down to Chestnut Street comes to town, we're handcuffed to have to approve things, either be special permit or right of use. So to give the parameters or put that box up gives us the ability to say that falls in line or it doesn't fall in line, right? So it gives us some guidance and things to do. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have discussions and see what the builders may want to do. But yeah.
Anybody's already been in that position. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just said it. I think it's human in its nature to have those kinds of discussions, especially from residents and from people that, like I said, maybe want to invest in town and be part of this process.
And I think laying that groundwork allows a very detailed map to say, this is what we're comfortable with. If you brought this to us, you can come with your ideas and then we'll guide from there. But if they don't have that map, especially from a planning board standpoint, we just have to say yes, right? And we end up with bright blue lights in the center or large things like that. Interrupt.
Anybody as a developer said to you, hey, you guys are on this committee. You're talking about this, yeah, these are my ideas. And just to have dialogue along the line.
Nobody's come to me, but
So I'm going to jump in on this. So we've had developers over the years. I was on the planning board for 5 years. And at that time, our planning director talked to many different developers. And they would come in with a thought, they would come in with an idea. They would ask questions. Is this allowed? Is this not allowed? Is there any way that, you know, we could adjust the bylaw to allow this? And those conversations go on, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but probably every few months, someone will be asking. And again, so do they happen? Yes, it happens. Do I know of any currently coming in asking about, hey, I want to do a mixed use development. Can we do it? I don't know of any currently.
That's not my question. So I totally understand what you're saying and I agree. And again, I think that there's nothing wrong with those kind of conversations. Whether you're talking about what this situation is or anything in the past or maybe in the future. for checking out what bylaws are, what potential development may be. I'm asking if anybody can just casual conversations.
The answer is no.
Been involved in conversations about what somebody might be interested in bringing to the table. And
Yeah.
having involved.
The answer is no, Rob.
All of these questions.
The answer is no.
Committee members.
Oh, yeah. So we discussed Wilbraham. We talked with the developer up there with regards to it.
They're just asking us what to do.
Specifics, I just.
Yeah.
Yes, so ever since this conversation started, developers have been as interested as everybody in this room about what's about to happen in the center of town. So yes, I've talked to multiple organizations, multiple developers about what's this gonna look like? And of course, the answer at this point is, we don't know yet. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like, right?
But they're really deferring to us.
And I understand.
No, the answer is no.
No. The answer
The
is no.
answer is no.
Just the fact that they're looking.
All right, no, yeah, this is not my mic, Sarah. Sorry.
So the short answer is no.
Well, but
The short answer is no. No.
every developer is asking us what we're doing.
The developers are asking the town what we're doing, they're not talking to us. So the short answer is,
They want to know how to fit in.
yeah.
But that was the question. Tom answered.
Yes. Tom answered the question. They're talking to.
It's not your job.
I'm not trying to catch anyone in anything. I just think it's.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
The answer is
We
no.
don't, yeah, we haven't.
Need to set a next meeting. We're hoping to have 2 meetings in February, if that's possible. We don't have to decide it today, but that's the goal, so that by March we have a final bylaw for this committee to approve.
Okay, so we are going to, you want to go ahead and jump ahead then? We're going to jump ahead to other business B2. We're going to try to set a date for the next steering committee meeting.
We'll take that offline.
Well, yeah, we'll figure that out and then we'll put that out to wherever. And
You need to approve the previous meeting minutes.
okay. Other business A, we need to approve the meeting minutes from December 12, 24. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Need to call on it?
Yeah.
Roll call,
Oh, yeah, we should do. roll call.
right?
Aye.
Who said aye?
Aye.
Carolyn Farrows, aye.
I'm a yes.
And Nicole.
And Nicole, can you come off?
Who said aye?
Oh, she did.
Thank you. Other business B, Deputy Town Managers Report. Can I get a motion?
Need a motion for that?
Do we need a motion for that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yes. Motion.
So moved.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Motion.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks everyone for your work tonight, and thanks to everybody who came out for the meeting. We will work with the committee to set the next 2 meetings. We're hoping to continue to move this conversation along. That it's concluding by the end of February. In March, we have a bylaw to forward to the planning and town council. A small group of members from this committee met with Bill Rail from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. We solicited questions from the planning board, the town council, and other members of this committee because we didn't want to violate the open meeting law. So when we met with Bill, I took notes. Those notes, nobody objected to the ones that I circulated early on. So they're there for your reference, and we will put them on the town website. They very specifically address questions about 40R and its impact on the zone and the town. And other than that, that's it.
I think that's it. Yep. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote.
Meeting adjourned.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Have
you.